When I was 14 years old, my Uncle Clyde sat me down, showed me the Coe History box that his dad and his Uncle Ray had made. It contained an item from every single one of the generations going back 5 or 6 in a couple hundred years. Everyone chose something small to represent something about themselves that they could put in the box. Everything ranging from house keys to pocket watches. And it goes to the oldest of every single generation. Fortunately, with my grandfather being the middle child, I'm left out of this equation. Shortly after showing me the Coe box, my Uncle Clyde pulled out a history book that his Uncle Ray had also made. In this, my Uncle Ray documented my family history going back 400 years, the colonial era America in the 1600s, when we first came over from England. He did this in the 1960s and the 1970s, well before internet or computers. Using my Uncle Ray's Coe History book as a roadmap, it took me back to Revolutionary War era Virginia, where I found the first piece to make my Coe History Guitar.
Similar to the box my Uncle Ray had made, except as a playable instrument.
Let's look at the first piece of family history in this guitar. The oldest piece of my guitar was obtained from a church down in Virginia that was built around 1810 by my Revolutionary War era grandfather, William. He was born in 1745 in British colonies of Maryland, but died in the United States. He fought in the war in 1776, and shortly after he was rewarded by the United States government and gifted 50 acres of land. Shortly after, he grew this land into a 300-acre farm, and on the corner of his property, him and a few other families decided to sponsor to have a church built around 1810. Around this same time, his son and my grandfather, Alva Sr., would have been around 11 years old and would have attended this church as a boy before moving us to Ohio about a decade later. Although most of William's buildings have been lost to time, the church on the corner of his property still stands well over 200 years later. This is where I found the oldest piece for my guitar, an old fence post on the corner of the cemetery in between William's grave and the church that he had built 200 years ago. This is what makes the cross on the back of the guitar, symbolizing the wood's history as well as its age. For the next ancestor in my Coe History guitar, we have Alvin Sr., born in 1799 out in the country in Virginia. Growing up, he ended up falling in love with a girl named Ruth Nichols, who had a very large family with aspirations of moving to the north. In the early 1820s, when Alvin and the Nichols family were preparing to leave, the patriarch of the Nichols family, Nathan Nichols, passed away. Having already sold their property in Virginia and purchased over 1,000 acres in Mount Gilead, Ohio, they were left in turmoil, not knowing what to do. So Alvin and the matriarch, Sarah Thomas Nichols, his mother-in-law, both took charge, and Alvin, at 23 years old, with his younger brother Abraham and the Nichols family in tow, ended up leading our family to Ohio. Once Alvin and his family got to Mount Gilead, they found most of it was uninhabited. They had to forge their own roads. They had to build their own houses out of the trees that they had available to them in their backyards. They used everything from black walnut to oak to cedar, the things that they had available, just as the Native Americans before them had to do. This takes me to the next piece of the Coe guitar on the back. This is a black walnut windowsill from the 1820s. I sourced this from my grandfather's friend, Dick Anderson, who's an antiques dealer. Back in the 1970s, Dick, already having an appreciation for history, saw that this old house from the 1820s was being torn down, and it had all this great quality wood inside. Hating to see such a thing go to waste, he decided to take as much as he could. And although this wasn't Alvin's settlement, the place that he got this from was about 5 to 10 minutes away, so driving time, which back then would have been a lot farther. But it's the same quality wood from the same time frame, and it's made by the same pioneers that would have came over around the same time Alvin did. and I can't be thankful enough for having access to such great quality wood. Born in 1834, Alvin Jr., the son of Alvin Sr., had a tough life ahead of him. Losing his mom as a child, he grew up as a farm boy with 5 brothers and sisters in the middle of Ohio during a tumultuous period. In 1857, Alvin Sr. sold his farm in Mount Gilead to help his son, Alvin Jr., buy his first farm in Chalk, now known as Johnsville, Ohio, just south of Mansfield. When the Civil War first broke out in 1861, Alvin was raising Clydesdale horses on the farm for the Union. But eventually, in 1862, Alvin Jr. left the farm and joined the Ohio Volunteer Infantry for the Union Army. While in the service, he was promoted to captain of his cavalry unit, where he fought Nathan Bedford Forrest and had his train derailed by the Confederate general. After Alvin successfully fought off General Forrest after a 16-day campaign, he then joined General Sherman at the Siege of Atlanta and eventually the March to the Sea. In an odd twist of fate, a few years after Alvin's service in the war, his own home that he had built with his father had burned down, and he had to watch the life he had built lost in the fire, similar to the punishment he inflicted on the Confederates. With no other choice but to rebuild, Alvin got to work. He built a house out of the trees on his property, just like his father before him had. Using the cedar, oak, and black walnut that was available, he used the oak to make wooden siding for his house that serves as the top of this guitar. He used the cedar to make barn beams and support for his house. And similar to my black walnut windowsill, Alvin furnished his staircase with the luxury wood. He had proved he was a master craftsman like his father, and a very capable soldier like his grandfather. Alvin's house and barns stand as a testament to his skills as a woodworker, as well as the unparalleled quality of pre-industrial revolution wood. His signature A. Coe, 1879, still stands on the barn to this day. These are just a few examples of the wood that we sourced from Alvin. This is a piece of siding from his house that he built in the 1870s after the fire. And he crafted this wood himself, he hung this wood himself, and the majority of it is still on the house to this day. I mean, you can't get plastic siding the last 5-10 years, and here's wood siding 150 years later. This piece makes up a decent chunk of the middle of the guitar. This is one of the barn beams that Alvin would have crafted out of cedar. You can see all the nicks and grooves from being used in a barn for well over 100 years that you would expect on a piece of wood like this. The next grandfather we have in line is Alva Coe, born in 1857, the son of Alvin Jr. Much like his dad and grandfather before him, Alva grew up as a farm kid in the country raising horses. He inherited the farm from his dad and helped construct many of the buildings on the property. Coe, spelled out on the headstock, is made out of iron square head nails that were pulled out of the barn beam. Attila, the luthier who built this guitar, had the idea to heat them with a torch and bend them like a blacksmith would. This is what I consider my contribution for Alva, considering that he was the caretaker of the farm after his father. Born in 1879, Clyde Coe, the son of Alva, was the last of 4 generations to live on the Coe farm. Suffering from a chronic illness since childhood, this didn't stop Clyde from playing minor league baseball, guitar, singing, as well as being a teacher and a handyman. Unfortunately, due to his illness, at age 53 he passed away, leaving my great-grandfather and his brother, my Uncle Ray, who wrote the history book, without a father in the middle of the Great Depression at 10 and 8 years old. Clint Walker, the current Coe farm owner, and who is largely responsible for giving me the majority of the wood for this guitar, also gave me an old skeleton key that belonged to the farmhouse. Since Clyde was part of the last generation to live there, it's likely it's his or one of his siblings' keys. And this is where the skeleton key on the back of the guitar in the middle of the cross comes from, and what I consider Clyde Coe's contribution. My great-grandfather, Earl Coe, was born October 26, 1922, with his brother Ray following on the same day 2 years later in 1924. When asking anyone from Ray to his nieces and nephews, to his wife and children, everyone describes Earl Coe the same way, with one word: strong. Losing his father at 10 years old, Earl dropped out of school shortly after so he could support his family. Going through such a thing in the middle of the Great Depression led to many nights going to bed starving, and sometimes resorting to taking food from his neighbor's garden. As my grandfather came into adulthood, he left the farm and got a job as a tool and die maker. But shortly following the Great Depression that consumed his childhood was the war that would define his early adulthood. Earl was shipped off to Guam in the Philippines to fight the Japanese with the Marines as an infantryman. He didn't like to talk about his service much, and was sent home towards the end of the war with malaria. His brother Ray was more fortunate, being stationed in Australia in the Navy and not seeing combat. Coming home to Mansfield, Ohio, he married my great-grandmother, Teresa DiGregorio, and had 3 kids. Earl lived in the city while Ray lived in the country, and throughout the rest of their lives they got together and crafted woodworking projects on Ray's farm, just as the Coes who came before them did on their own farms. The Coe bros made everything from furniture to jewelry boxes to household items that have been around for generations. And this is where I sourced the next piece of wood for my guitar. The 2 redwood strips come from a bench that the brothers made 50 to 60 years ago and was given to me by my Aunt Judy. The buckeye in the middle of the guitar came from my Grandpa Coe. He kept it in his pocket for good luck for decades up until he died. And now it's a piece of my guitar. My grandfather, who I call Papa, was born in Mansfield, Ohio in 1948. Danny was the first Coe in my family lineage to have been born and raised in a neighborhood in the suburbs and not ranching or farming. He grew up with a large Italian family in his neighborhood thanks to his mom's side, the DiGregorios, and is named after his uncle Danny DiGregorio, who was a professional boxer. Whether it was playing sports or eating spaghetti, Papa always had a whole neighborhood to do it with. Being a talented all-state athlete as a defensive tackle for Mansfield High School, Papa earned himself a scholarship to Xavier for football in the late 1960s, becoming the first Coe in my family line to go to college, where he eventually earned his master's degree. Post-graduation led Papa to teaching and coaching, where he was able to maintain sports as a regular part of his life and career. The skull and crossbones on the back of the headstock is from my Papa's coaching days in the 70s. Kids would earn these on their helmet for sacking the quarterback. The knobs on the guitar are made out of a $50 coin my grandfather received for Christmas as a kid in the 1960s from his Aunt Jenny on the DiGregorio side of the family. He also contributed by painting the Ohio flag with his father's buckeye in the middle of it. My dad was born in 1970 in Mansfield, Ohio, but shortly relocated after to Medina County with his parents and my grandparents, Papa and Nana. Following in his grandfather's footsteps, my dad also joined the Marines, before later pursuing a career as a corrections officer. Growing up, my dad introduced me to music when I stole my first CD from his car in 2nd grade, Blues Brothers' Briefcase Full of Blues. From that moment on, I knew I wanted to play music. He drove me to my first guitar lessons and helped me buy my first amp, before exposing me to Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen. My dad's contribution to this project was helping me process the barn beams and siding for Attila, before the guitar could be built. We destroyed his saw blade in the garage trying to slice through iron nails so they could be pulled out with a soldering iron and needle-nose pliers. Needless to say, several hours of work later, the wood was ready to go. And most importantly, we didn't blow up Attila's planer with a 19th century nail. Definitely the most anxiety-inducing part of this project. Attempting to find a way to include my mom's side of the family in this guitar led me to reaching out to my grandma and grandpa Gallagher. I told my grandma Gallagher that I wished that I had a piece of wood from my great-grandfather's bar that I used to bootleg liquor in during Prohibition out in Cleveland. She said, "I have an idea." She walked into her basement and she took a piece off the bar that they had that my mom's 12 brothers and sisters gather around every single Christmas Eve. And this is what makes the little bump on the neck heel in the guitar. Piece of my own personal family history growing up with the Gallagher family. And now for the last piece of the Coe guitar, me. I was born in 1996 to David and Jeannie Coe in Cleveland, Ohio. I was fortunate enough that when I was born, I had 8 grandparents between my great-grandparents and my normal grandparents. And for the first time in Coe history in over 400 years, a great-grandfather met his great-grandson when my Grandpa Coe held me as a baby. Around 2015, I reached out to my great-grandfather's brother, Uncle Ray, the one who wrote the Coe family history book. I wanted to share with him my idea I had for the Coe guitar, and we agreed that we would meet up after the holidays that January. Unfortunately, that December my Uncle Ray passed away, and I was unable to sit down with him and explain my idea for the Coe guitar. But fortunately, through my Uncle Ray's thorough research, he designed the Coe book to be passed down for generations and not needing him to be there to explain it. And I was able to use it to follow everything to build this guitar. Because of him and the Walker family, the Coe History Guitar is finally complete. When creating a guitar as original as the barn would, I wanted to have an original design to go with it. So I reached out to Attila at Attila Custom Guitars in Parma, Ohio, to see what he could do. Attila had an original design he had been working on for a few years, but hadn't had a chance to put it into a guitar yet. So he sent me it, and we'd sent pictures back and forth to each other, where he sent me a design, I made a couple of tweaks, I sent it back to him, he sent it back to me, and we ultimately arrived on this. And really what this guitar is it's a culmination of a bunch of different designs, almost how it's a culmination of all the different ancestors I have. The top half of the guitar is an original design that Attila came up with, that's somewhat based off of a Gibson SG. While the bottom half, we ended up putting my Stratocaster that I've had since high school on the bottom and traced that so that it's kind of a mix of both. Similar to how when Paul Reed Smith invented the Custom 24 design, he ended up taking a Stratocaster and a Les Paul and putting them on top of each other and tracing them to come up with an original design out of 2 classics. You can see the similarities in the top half of the body here between the Gibson SG and the design that Attila used. It's a little bit offset, a little bit more like a Stratocaster, but you can see it still has horns that are contoured in a way similar to a Gibson SG, while still being original. Sticking with the concept of mixing an SG with a Stratocaster, the guitar body is somewhat thinner, comparable to an SG, while still retaining the contours you find on a Stratocaster, so it's a really comfortable, lightweight, and resonant guitar that brings the best of both. So for the neck design on the Coe History Guitar, I've never hid from the fact that I've always been a big fan of Roland-era Gibsons in the late 70s. I had Attila build me this Les Paul shortly after he built me the pink Telecaster, and it's based off of some of my favorite 70s era Norlands. One of my favorite things about them are the necks, because they made several piece necks with the grain going in opposite directions with these really chunky volutes. It's very different from the traditional Gibson design of a one-piece mahogany neck, but I usually find that they're a lot more stable and give me a lot less issues throughout the year. So we ended up using that on the barn guitar. To add further stability to the 3-piece neck, Attila and I decided to add carbon fiber rods that go right on either side of the truss rod. So this neck's pretty solid and it's not going anywhere. Another guitar company that I'm a big fan of is Music Man. So we ended up doing a sculpted heel where the neck meets the body so it's easier to reach the higher frets, similar to how you see on some of the Albert Lee models. For the fretboard, we decided to use Brazilian ebony. And for the inlays, I ended up deciding to do my family crest across the fretboard. At the 12th fret, we did the family shield, and then I did a dot style inlay across that it's actually the birds that would be normally inside of the shield. So for the headstock design, we ended up using one of Attila's original creations that he came up with quite a few years ago. We just lifted it from the Les Paul custom that he made me, and we just put it straight on the barn guitar, and I think it looks really great. It's pretty traditional looking while looking really original at the same time. The next design that we lifted was from a Fender Telecaster. We ended up using the control plate because I'm pretty familiar with how the volume tone feels right under my fingers, where I can really easily reach to be able to do volume swells, just like Jeff Beck or Roy Buchanan did. Drawing from one of my favorite custom guitar builders, Scott Walker Guitars, I wanted to have every little piece of this guitar be handmade. The bridge and the control plate I had custom made by Bobe Guitar Hardware out of Hungary, who makes some really great quality stuff. The Telecaster style plate here is actually an Alembic toggle switch design that we redeveloped so that it'd be big enough to cover a Telecaster style route and not just a three-way switch. I sent my design idea off to Bobe Guitars and he knew what to do with it immediately, and he did exactly what I asked him to. The knobs I actually sourced from Haramis Musical Hardware, who I found on Instagram a few years ago. They really have some great original designs, and half the time I place an order, I'll just send them a picture of a custom build that Attila and I just finished and say, do whatever you think will look best. With this guitar, I wanted to be a little bit more precise. So I ended up sending in a couple of coins that I got from my grandfather, and I said, find a way to incorporate these into some knobs. And he did. They're a little bit bigger being the $half size, but really great grip, and they look fantastic with the guitar as well. The tuners I had custom made here in Cleveland by Spursel Guitar Tuners. I've been using their tuners on just about all my guitars since I was in high school, and I've always been a big fan of them. For these ones, I went down there and I told them what I wanted, something black, something gold to match the brass and black hardware that I had on the guitar, and they did a fantastic job with it as always. Continuing with the hybrid of ideas theme, I had all three pickups in the barn guitar custom made. The bridge in the middle I had made by Pete Billcroft at Vintage Vibe Guitars in Florida, and the neck pickup I had made by MJ at Seymour Duncan's Custom Shop. For the bridge pickup, I told Pete that I wanted to use a Gibson Les Paul Deluxe style mini humbucker. Twisting the design a little bit, we decided to use 12 pole pieces and also leave it uncovered. On top of that, following Tim Shaw, who's made pickups for both Gibson and Fender since the 1970s, we used a mix of Alnico magnets to get a really nice even string balance going across all 6 strings, and really giving a unique tone at the same time. For the middle pickup, we decided to do a reverse orientation G&L Comanche style pickup, which was one of the very last pickups that Leo Fender designed before he passed away. The reason we wanted to do the reverse orientation was having the pole pieces for the higher 3 strings closer to the neck adds a little bit more bass, and having the pole pieces for the lower 3 strings adds a little bit more treble. Overall, the tonality of the middle pickup, it's very flat, neutral, even. It's almost like using the rhythm circuit on a Jazzmaster and just perfectly pulls you out of the mix. And it's a really great contrast to the punch and nice edge that you get from the bridge pickup. For the neck pickup, I reached out to MJ at Seymour Duncan's Custom Shop, and I told her I basically wanted a P90 that was going to give me enough sustain that I could sound like Santana. She didn't disappoint. The neck pickup, having that extra sustain, requires a lot more output. So it's so beefy that when I go from one of these 2 pickups to the neck pickup, it's almost like getting a 10 decibel clean boost. It's kind of cool because it's passive. I don't have to worry about batteries or anything like that. And if I show up to a gig where I can't use pedals, or if it's sitting in or something like that, it's almost like having a pedal built into my guitar with how much louder I can cut with solos using that pickup. Having the different types of wood in this guitar, such as redwood, black walnut, ebony, maple, cedar, and oak, really adds to a nice, bright, lively guitar, or as some would call with the Jerry Garcia style guitars, or even some of the Olympics, a hippie sandwich with all the different kinds of wood that are sandwiched together in this guitar. The only wood that we did purchase for it was for the neck. And the reason for this is because when I was talking to Attila, he said that we probably shouldn't rely on having the most important piece of the guitar be a barn beam or something that's been sitting outside and abused for so long. Otherwise, that'll lead to more playability issues down the line. And I want to make sure this guitar lasts way longer than the projects that we put into it. Having a brass nut as well as a brass bridge really contributes to a Stratty-like tone. But having the thinner SG style body and not having a tremolo keeps it grounded in the Gibson realm as well. It really does lie somewhere in between a Stratocaster and an SG as far as the tone goes, and it can really pull off both pretty easily. Everything from my favorite Jimi Hendrix to my favorite Black Sabbath riffs. It's just very easy to play. That's enough about the history and the guitar geek side of things. Let's finally hear this guitar. Next, we are going down to my grandfather's barn that he built in the 1870s that's currently owned by the Walker family, who operates it as a wedding venue called Cedar Creek Barn. Thanks to the kindness of the Walker family, who also helped me source a good chunk of the wood for this guitar, we were able to take a full band down and record a live video and make a record inside of my Civil War captain grandfather's barn. Let's hear it.
Some people say a man's made out of mud, but a poor man's made of muscle and blood, muscle and blood, skin and bones, a mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. Grabbed me a shovel, went to mine, loaded 16 tons. Number 9 Coe with a straw bar said, well, bless my soul. Loaded 16 tons. What did he get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. And I was born one morning, it was drizzling rain, fighting and trouble, it's my middle name. Raised in a cage break by an old mama lion. Ain't no high-toned woman makes me walk the line. I load 16 tons. What do I get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Born one more. Lot of men didn't, yeah, a lot of men died. One versus iron, the other one steel. If the left one don't get ya, the right one will. I load 16 tons. What do I get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul. Company and store. 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. Owes my soul. I said I owes my soul to the company store. everything I do is wrong. You know I tried real hard to get along with that woman of mine. You know I tried real hard to get along with that woman of mine. But the harder I tried, the more she'd walk around cheating and lying. Yeah, yeah. I said I walked down from Dallas, Texas, out to Wichita Falls, thinking about my big-leg woman wasn't no walk at all. I believe my baby, she got a black cat bone. Seems like everything I do seems like I do it wrong. Seems like everything I do is wrong.
There's a red house over yonder, and it's where my baby stays. Red house over yonder is where my baby stays. And I ain't seen my baby, no, no, in 99 and 1/2 days. About time I see her, huh? Wait a minute, there's something wrong. Oh, see, my key won't unlock this door now. Wait a minute, there's something wrong. See, my key, oh, my key won't unlock this door. Oh, I got a bad feeling deep down inside. It seems that my baby don't live here no more. Yonder now, gonna make my way across that hill. Going back, oh yonder, oh, I'm gonna make my way across that hill. My baby don't love me no more, but you better bet her sister will.
Well, I say when death came knocking on my mama's door singing, come on, mama, are you ready to go? You know my mother stooped down and buckled up her shoes. She moved on down by that Jordan stream. Well, I heard her shout,